December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes forest lay cloaked in frost and shadow. SS Lieutenant Colonel Joachim Peiper surveyed his steel predators, the pride of the panzer divisions, the apex of German armored warfare. For the first few hours, it seemed Hitler's audacious gamble might actually succeed. His elite Kampfgruppe Peiper, the spearhead of the Third Reich's last great offensive, carved chaos through American lines with terrifying precision. But Peiper wasn't watching the enemy. He was watching the fuel gauges. Every lurch of a Tiger or Panther tank drained precious gasoline, fuel that was the thin line between a breakthrough and utter immobilization. The entire offensive, the Reich's last hope, rested on audacity, surprise, and one desperate prayer, that fuel would not fail them. They had been promised by Hitler himself that the Americans, decadent and weak-willed, would abandon their stockpiles. For a brief, euphoric moment in the snow-laden forest, Peiper's men stumbled upon what seemed like that miracle, a massive American fuel dump. At first, it felt like salvation had arrived, but the truth was far more chilling, a revelation of mathematical certainty. The Reich was doomed, and American logistics would crush Hitler's ambitions before a single decisive battle could be won. By the fall of 1944, Germany was being strangled on all fronts. In the east, the Red Army smashed relentlessly toward Berlin. In the west, Allied forces pressed from France and the Low Countries. Within the German high command, desperation hung in the air like a fog. But in Hitler's mind, this was the canvas for one final masterpiece of destruction, Operation Walk am Rhein. 3 German armies, spearheaded by the last surviving elite panzer divisions, would punch through a weak point in the American lines, cross the Meuse River, split the Allied armies, and seize Antwerp, a port critical to the survival of the German war effort. Its capture promised to refill starving fuel depots and supply lines, breathing life into Germany's exhausted forces. This reliance on captured supplies was not incidental. It was the plan itself. But the Reich was bleeding out. Allied bombers had destroyed nearly 90% of German synthetic fuel production. The grape oil fields of Ploesti in Romania were under Soviet control. The Luftwaffe, once a symbol of invincibility, was grounded. Jets could not fly. Tanks could barely move. On the home front, civilian vehicles were rare, and the Gestapo hunted black market gasoline dealers as traitors. Consider the numbers. In 1944, Germany produced roughly 33 million barrels of oil. The United States alone produced 1.8 billion barrels. A single oil field in East Texas could outproduce the entirety of German-controlled Europe. While American engineers experimented with refining processes, German quartermasters made agonizing decisions. Which tanks would advance and which would remain stationary, doomed by a lack of fuel. Peiper's armored fist, the 6th Panzer Army, led by SS General Sepp Dietrich, was equipped with some of the most feared tanks of the war. Tiger IIs with thick, sloped armor and monstrous 88mm guns could shrug off almost any Allied attack from the front. Panthers were versatile and deadly in their own right, but both drank fuel as if it were water. A single Tiger II consumed roughly 2.5 gallons per mile, a number that doubled over Ardennes terrain. A German tank division had tanks that could not possibly move without constant fuel supply, a fatal paradox born from the philosophy of quality over quantity. For every 1 gallon of gasoline burned by an American Sherman, a Tiger II consumed 3. Fielding a tank army without fuel was like deploying an army of immobile steel coffins. And keeping them moving wasn't simple. Each type of tank required a different engine. Different fuel, different spare parts. Trucks were needed just to carry fuel forward, and each was a prime target for Allied fighter bombers, the dreaded Jabos that ruled the skies. By December 1944, the German supply chain was collapsing. Fuel was siphoned from damaged vehicles. Captured Allied jeeps were drained for whatever they could provide. Even if Peiper commanded 100 tanks, without fuel for more than 30, his offensive was crippled before it began. His panzer divisions were hunters sent into the wild, expected to feed on the enemy, on the hope of capturing American fuel. Meanwhile, America fought a global war powered by an almost limitless river of petroleum. For the U.S. Army, fuel was constant, abundant, and reliable, and the systems to deliver it were nothing short of engineering marvels. The Red Ball Express, a convoy of nearly 6,000 trucks, mostly driven by African-American soldiers, became the lifeblood of the Allied advance after D-Day. Operating on a 24/7 loop, they delivered over 412,000 tons of supplies in just 82 days, consuming 300,000 gallons of fuel per day simply to keep themselves moving. Every day, the flow of material ensured that American forces could attack anywhere, anytime, without hesitation. And then there was Operation Pluto, pipelines under the English Channel, pumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel daily to Allied depots, directly sustaining the front-line armies. The scale was staggering. In late 1944, the Allies consumed over 7.5 million gallons of fuel daily in Northwest Europe. Even after burning millions, reserves remained untouched, flowing steadily from Texas oil fields to European battlefields. On December 16th, the Ardennes exploded into action. Peiper's Kampfgruppe poured through gaps in the American lines. Then, near the village of Honsfeld, the Germans hit a jackpot. A U.S. fuel and supply depot, 50,000 gallons of gasoline. To the starving panzer crews, it was paradise, a tangible symbol of victory. For a brief, intoxicating moment, they believed Hitler's gamble was working. Walls of American jerry cans stretched 10 feet high. The forest air was rich with the sharp, almost heady scent of high-octane fuel. Soldiers imagined a refueled dash to the Meuse River, a chance to seize Antwerp. But reality soon set in. Among the crates were newspapers and shipping manifests, revealing an unsettling truth. This fuel wasn't a lost treasure. It was part of a constantly replenished supply chain, sourced from Texas and delivered to Europe in under 6 weeks. The Germans realized the jackpot was pocket change. Their triumph was insignificant against a river of American oil flowing endlessly to the front. Then came the psychological blow, deliberate destruction. Near Stavelot and Malmedy, American engineers opened spigots and grenades, sending 2.5 million gallons of gasoline up in smoke, denying it to the Germans. Across the Ardennes in just 1 week, an estimated 8 million gallons were consumed in this controlled destruction, more than an entire panzer division could hope to use in a month. To the Germans, it was incomprehensible waste. To the Americans, it was sound doctrine. The fuel they burned was trivial compared to the ever-flowing supply lines. While German tanks ground to a halt, American convoys continued rolling, pipelines pumping, factories producing, trucks delivering. By Christmas Eve, Peiper's mighty Tiger IIs were stranded steel coffins. Of the 5,000 elite soldiers who had started the offensive, only 800 returned on foot. They weren't defeated by superior tanks. They were defeated by an empty fuel gauge and an enemy with the resources to fight with fire. The Ardennes offensive was not lost on the battlefield alone. It was lost in the factories of Detroit, the oil fields of Texas, and the shipyards of California. The U.S. produced over 50 times more crude oil than Germany. While the German industry struggled to survive, Ford's Willow Run factory churned out a B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. Shipyards launched cargo vessels faster than U-boats could sink them. The American soldier marched, supplied, and fueled by industrial might. Churchill summed it up succinctly: petroled every movement. Stalin was even blunter. The war was decided by engines and octane. The German soldiers who stumbled upon that fuel dump saw not a prize, but a yardstick measuring the unbridgeable gap between their exhausted nation and the industrial colossus they had underestimated. The Battle of the Bulge and the story of those American fuel dumps reveals a hidden truth of modern war. Victories are not just decided by courage, tactics, or the heroics of elite soldiers. They are won long before the first shot is fired, on assembly lines, in oil fields, and across supply chains. The German shock wasn't just the loss of fuel. It was the understanding that their enemy could afford to be wasteful, limitless, and relentless. The Ardennes was a clash between desperation and abundance, ideology and industry. And in the end, it was the Americans' ability to supply, sustain, and destroy at will that decided the fate of the Third Reich. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of war, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment below. Which other battles do you think were won long before the first shot was fired? Let us know. History is waiting to be uncovered.